people. So that's what we got here. But just to tell you what else is going to go on, just in case you find a different flow, is about 2 o'clock over in the stage area, the dance floor there off the stage. Two lovely humans, Love and Love, are going to. They kind of combined their two little offerings into one offering, which is a open-hearted song workshop with weaving with ferns, some nature craft. So if you feel called to do that too, you can head over there and sing and weave, or just sing, or whatever. Or you can stay here. And then at 4, there's a somatic explorations workshop that is up in the Harmony Hall as you go up. And then after here, this workshop, there is a workshop with Jenny on herbal allies for the springtime. Jenny's a real healer. Good information. So that's the rest of it. But right now we're going to learn how to dye things with Shelby. And have grace for Shelby because we didn't have enough setup time. So you got this. You got this.
Hi, friends. Thank you so much for being here and for your patience. Videographer friend, are you good? Do you have needs? Cool. Love that for all of us. So welcome. My name is Shelby Lynn. I have been teaching foraging for about 15 years and natural dyes for about 7. And my background just really comes from growing up with plants in a pretty intimate way. I lost my housing as a teenager and ended up being homeless and just spent a lot of time doing some real deep dives on foraging, which turned out to be a really beautiful thing. So not formally trained. And the reason to say that is that you don't have to be either. I think natural dyes can often feel intimidating for people because it seems like this deep alchemical rite where you're like, oh, you must have known this for many generations and your great-grandfather's grandfather must have known it. But he mustn't have. He may have, and that's great for him. Love that for him. But it's also okay to start right now knowing absolutely anything that you do or do not know. So first off, I would love to ask, well, just popcorn, just a few people, maybe a couple words or a sentence. What is your experience with or impression of lichens and fungi for dyes?
Beauty.
Yeah, it's nice.
Soft.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Old man's beard.
Ancestral.
It's nice. Yeah.
Medicine.
Sure. Any other things that come up for people?
Patience.
Girl. Yeah. I would also add experimentation and chaos. One of the wonderful things about working with natural dyes, also one of the continually frustrating things about working with natural dyes, is that there is this kind of element of flow and chaos that you have to embrace. Because unlike organisms that are grown specifically for consumption, like even commercially produced natural dyes, like say you bought coreopsis in a store, that coreopsis has mimicable conditions that you can expect and predict. But these lichens and fungi come from really diverse conditions that we probably don't know that much about. You know, you may have run into this Dyer's polypore for one day of its existence and not seen it for the potentially decades that it has been around. So there are going to be things that will affect the outcome of your dyes that you just can't know until it's happening, which is really frustrating sometimes when you're like, I want to make this very specific shade of purple and it's a slightly different shade of purple, but also can be really beautiful in that it really encourages you to embrace that change and flow that is the natural state of life, whether we intend it or not. So, quick question. What's a lichen?
Not a moss.
Not a moss. Never a moss. Who said? Good answer. Something said out. Someone said something about algae. Symbiotic relationship. Yes, a symbiotic relationship between whats and who's.
Algae and fungi.
And sometimes cyanobacteria.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I remember being taught in school, a lichen is when a fungus and an alga take a liken to each other, which is very cute, but not a full picture of what a lichen is. Ecosystem is a really great way to frame that. Sometimes people will also frame it as a fungus who is farming. Very interesting perspective. Oh, absolutely. A fungus who is farming, which is a very interesting perspective. So fundamentally, a lichen is a relationship that exists between several symbionts, several little critters living together, none of which is a plant. You have a fungal component, which really makes the structure of the lichen. And you might have several different fungal partners in that as well. And then you have oftentimes an algal component, and it can be several different algae as well. And sometimes you will also have a cyanobacteria. Not a good example. You'll have to imagine it. Cyanobacteria in algae often look like little freckles. Like if you have a green thallus, which is the name for the body, the like leafy parts of a lichen, and you've got like little dark spots on it, that's a really good clue that there's probably some cyanobacteria kicking around in there. Also, side note, the person who figured out that that there was so much more complexity going on in there was just some dude, not even a scientist, just a dude living in a trailer in Montana, looking at lichens real close, and like revolutionized the way we were thinking about this like around 15 years ago. So this is really recent cutting edge science. And the thing about lichens, y'all, is they do so much work in the ecosystem. They are incredible, weird beings that do all this wild stuff, and we know basically nothing about them. It is a wild and exciting new frontier of science and of human and other being interconnection, where we are just starting to form these relationships. And before we start talking about dyes, I also want to talk about a really important ethos that is always necessary to speak about when foraging. And that's really about building relationships with organisms. So it's so rad, y'all, that foraging is really having a moment right now where it's getting popular again, where people are like, ooh, foraging, so sexy. Love that. And with popularity also comes the watering down of information and some risk. For example, people will sometimes get just enough knowledge to make irresponsible choices that can have detrimental impacts on the ecosystem. So unfortunately, there is no one size fits all method for interacting with any organism. For example, you may have heard in some foraging books, never take more than 30% of a plant, which is like nice, I guess, but a wildly oversimplified way to think about it. For example, how much Himalayan blackberry do you think you could take without it harming the ecosystem? 1 million%. Yes, more than exists. It'll be fine. You can't hurt the blackberry. You go ahead and try. But what about the critically endangered Mount Hood bugbane? How much could you take? Nothing. Yeah. If you take any amount of bugbane, you're an asshole. And you don't want to be that guy. But you can have many other bugbanes. Like, just don't limit your world of bugbanes. Go be the bane to some other bug. It'll be fine. Anyway, so the point is there are no shortcuts. The only way to know how to interact best with an organism is to build a relationship with that individual organism. And I'm sure we all have like different levels of woo that we are here. So if you are a higher level of woo, that can include a spiritual component of like connecting with the plant emotional organism emotionally. And if you would rather not do that, it can also be things like observing this organism closely and carefully and learning its ways. It is critically important to learn its ways to keep yourself safe, to keep the organism safe, and to keep others around you, people and other organisms, safe. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
You rock.
Oh, thanks. That's nice.
I have a question about lichens.
Great.
I always heard them being in environments with like clean air quality. Is there something to that?
Oh, there's so much to that. Yes. Okay. Yes, and also entirely no.
Okay, cool.
Because lichens are incredibly diverse. So lichens, if we were to put them in a kingdom, we can't, of course, because they are several organisms living together. But if we were to put them in a kingdom, they would not be an animal. They would not be a plant. They would not be a protist. They are like their own separate thing. So within that, there's a wild amount of diversity. So there are some lichens who do not tolerate any amount of pollution. Actually, this is a good example here. Not any amount, but these are pretty low tolerance of pollution. This, ooh, does anyone know this one? It's like a pretty popular guy.
Wolf lichen?
Hell yeah, it's wolf lichen. Points. There's no points. So this is Lotharia vulpina, pretty not tolerant of air pollution. So you will not really see this guy in a city. And if you see this one, it's an indicator that you've got some pretty clean air around. This guy here, Avernia prunastrii, the nasty, as my good friend Orca calls it, who we will be dying with today, is very tolerant of pollution and is very common in cities because of that. It's also why this is a really great lichen to start dying with, because it grows in great abundance in urban areas. It's all over the place. There are some lichens that prefer more polluted areas. Bless you. Some lichens are, what's the word? I don't know. They need a lot of nitrogen in order to survive. So some lichens can actually be indicators that there is too much nitrogen in your habitat. Like a number of rock lichens are that way. There are some lichens that grow inside the nuclear reactors at Chernobyl. They thrive on it. They cannot get cancer, and they are living their best life. They love radiation. So lichens are just wildly diverse. So you can see why you can't make a single rule about it. In the same way that you can't say like plants are one way or animals are one way. There's a lot of us, and we're many different ways.
Is there lichen in the middle of the earth?
I would love to think that. We haven't been there, so we don't really know. But that would be nice. I'm liking it. Yeah.
I've seen some lichen that looks a lot like cabbage leaves, and it has big black spots on it. I don't see it on your table necessarily.
Okay, where did you see it?
Out in really wet forested areas.
In the trees, in the canopy?
On the
ground,
and
on
at
rocks?
the base. At the base mostly. Is it like this one right here?
Is it this one? Is it that one? It's okay if it's not.
It was spottier.
Okay. It might be this one. This one has spots sometimes. It's also abundantly common. Ooh.
Oh, it's black underneath.
Oh, it's black underneath. It's not this one. Let's go through this lichen ID book later and try and figure out what it is. It could be so many things. Lichens are cool. What is a lichen? Yeah. Can I get a couple volunteers to do some activities while we're talking? Thank you. I'm going to need 3 volunteers to do a fiber thing and 1 volunteer to do a less exciting making boiling happen thing. So who are my fiber friends? Please come on, fiber friends. Friend. Okay, 4. We're doing 4. 4's great. Okay, so what you're going to do while we're talking is that, oh, you know what? Do you need us? Yeah, we're going to do it anyway. We don't strictly need to do this, but we're going to do it anyway because we're already here. So what you're going to do is you are going to make these into 2 smaller hanks like this, and then tie around them 4 times. Does that make sense? So have one person hold your arms like this, another person wrap around it until it's about halfway done. Then we're going to have each group do that once. And then you see how these are tied like this? You're going to tie them like that. I think you've got your partner over there. Thank you very much, fiber friends. Continue, and then I need a stove person, please. Thank you, stove person. We need to dump this into the bucket and then put this onto the heat. Thank you very much. Okay, what is a lichen? Lichens are cool. A couple of things about how lichens are cool, and then we'll talk about dyes. Lichens do a bunch of weird stuff. There are medicinal lichens, there are poisonous lichens, there are dye lichens, there are lichens that support entire ecosystems. So this one, for example, that we were just talking about, the wolf lichen, the reason it's called Lotharia vulpina is it's Latin for wolf death, the death of wolves. And it was used historically in Scandinavia to poison canids, mostly wolves. It has volpinic acid, which can also be toxic to humans. So this is one that we don't eat, but it makes this beautiful chartreuse color. Really, really fabulous. There's a tiny, you probably can't see this. There's a really small black one here called black hair lichen, black old man's beard sometimes. This is Bryoria, small amount. And this Bryoria was a really important food lichen for Coast Salish people. You can boil it down and make a delicious mush. Like it's like oatmeal kind of, but hair.
Hair meal. It's like hair
Meal. I promise it is good, but it sounds bad. It's good. Just trust. With some huckleberries and some hazelnuts. It's good. This one, the common oak moss, one of the ones we're going to dye with today, is used in the perfume industry. So whenever you see a perfume and it's like with notes of oak moss, that's this guy right here. Yeah, he smells nice, they say. He's going to smell bad today because we did bad things to him, but that's not his fault. I would like that. Please and thank you. And this one, this is my favorite lichen in the whole wide world. This is a Labaria species. We've got Labaria pulmonaria and Labaria oregana here. And so has anybody heard about how salmon runs help high mountain forests in our bioregion? Has anyone heard of this? I see you nodding. You want to say about it? It's okay.
So what little I know about it is that the salmon go up the riverways of the higher elevations and the nutrients on waterways.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So historically,
Fish DNA in the trees, right?
yeah, there is. So historically, salmon have been some of the most important beings in this bioregion in supporting human life, but also in supporting entire ecosystems, both marine ecosystems and inland, even like high montane, like mountain ecosystems. It's wild because on the salmon runs, when they would come up and they would get murdered by the thousands, eaten by bears, eaten by eagles, eaten by some other guy, a fisher, who knows, an otter, I don't know. And then they would get dragged off into the woods and their bodies would decompose. And fish are really rich in nitrogen, as many of you gardeners may know. Nitrogen is the most important building block of plant life. And so many of our like coastal giant trees, like the giant redwoods and the giant Douglas firs, who by the way, grow taller than redwood trees.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What? No, literally.
Oh! guys. It was a what of what. That's fair. Douglas firs grow taller than redwood trees. The reason we don't have taller Douglas firs anymore is because, what? No, because we cut them down during colonization. So they've all come down in the last like 150 years. But like the Nooksack giant is a great example of a Douglas fir that is taller, almost 100 feet taller than the tallest redwood Hyperion. Almost a full like 10-story building taller. And I just think that Douglas firs, this guy right here, deserves more credit. Fabulous, beautiful. Anyway, the point is, when we dammed the rivers, the salmon stopped running in the same way that they had been. And without their nitrogenous bodies dissolving, these giants, some of the largest trees in the world, largest organisms ever to exist on the planet, would have all died, except for this guy right here, this little humble lichen. Sorry, I like cry talking about this lichen. He's just so beautiful and he does good work. So the lungwort lichen lives high in the canopies of these montane forests and is able to trap up to 80% of atmospheric nitrogen. So trapping nitrogen in his little phallus, in his little body here. And so when he falls to the ground, it's actually the time that he's doing the most work. When he falls to the ground and decomposes, that's when the nitrogen is added back into the soil. And if this one was to go away now, this is the last bastion of nitrogen holding these forests together. And if the lungwort were to go away, these forests could no longer exist unless we were finding a new way to add a bunch of nitrogen in. So I'll take a second to say thank you to lungwort. Thank you, lungwort. I'm so sorry we ask so much of you, but thank you. Keep it up. Good job. Okay.
What color does it dye?
Good question. This one. Yeah. They also make black, but I don't have a good example of lungwort black. Lungwort black is a brown toned black, but this black over here is a blue toned black, which is made with Oregon white oak galls. Cool. So, who here has done any natural dyeing? Love that. Actually, I know you did. Yeah. Nice. Love that. I know you have. I have brought something you dyed. So cool. So the general process for natural dyeing, first we got to think about the type of fiber that we have, and then we have to think about how to fix the dye to the fiber, and then we have to make our dye bath. There's like a lot of different ways we can like complicate that, but very simply, you can figure out your fiber, figure out your mordant, which we'll explain in a little bit, and then make your bath. So I want to talk a little bit about fibers first. Who has the silks?
The hand-spun ones here.
Yep. Yep.
Oh.
Ooh, yeah. Did everyone get a chance to touch the silk? Touch it. Touch it.
What?
Touch it.
Does
You pass it around.
touch
I don't
the
know. So the long, flowy, light one is a silk chiffon we bought in a store. You're probably very familiar with it. There's also a rough homespun silk. Many people are not familiar with this kind, but it's really cool. It's not a dainty, delicate fabric. It is a tough workhorse of a fabric. Oh, I'm glad you do. That's very nice. And there's also some raw silk fibers called silk noil over there. So there's two broad categories of fibers. There are cellulose fibers, often called plant fibers, and there are protein fibers, often, though not always, ones that come from animals. So what are some examples of protein fibers? Wool. Yep. Angora. Silk. Linen. Linen is a plant, but it's a very good one. What other things come from animals that we wear? Leather. People never get that one. What about human leather? Sorry, that's a creepy way to phrase that. Skin, regular skin that you have not. It's on your body now. Skin. It's fine.
Alive.
Alive. Yeah, don't do that. This isn't a Hannibal Lecter kind of lecture. That's something else. Yeah, good point. Very true. Thank you. Did we get that one emptied out too? Okay, can we get that filled with water? And then, hey, Orca, would you put some alum into that, please? Yep, it's gonna be great. Just eyeball it. It'll be great. It's in that box. Protein fibers. Yes. What other types of things are made out of protein?
Awesome fur. They make yarn out of possum.
That never gotten that answer. Thank you for talking about here. Love that. Also, I want to add hair. The hair on your head. Yeah. So especially if you have light colored hair, it's much easier to dye. But any color hair can be dyed. Black hair does really well with indigo. So make it blue black. Feathers are another one. You can dye feathers. There are a lot of really beautiful, like Northern Coast Salish traditional feather capes that are really beautifully dyed. I was like, oh my god, you guys. The dye tradition in like Southern Alaska, it's incredible. It's impeccable. Cool. What about cellulose fibers, plant fibers? Hemp.
Bamboo.
Cotton. Bamboo. You said linen before. What else?
Lotus silk.
Lotus silk. Oof. Wow. So much fiber knowledge in this group. That's really nice.
Is flax, right? Flax is a fiber?
Yeah, flax is a fiber. And when people say linen, the linen that is sold can be flax, can be hemp, or can be ramie, which is nettle fiber. And you can call all of it linen, which is kind of cool. This is nettle fiber, BT dubs. Also, this is nettle dye. How about that? Yeah. Fun. Nettles are nice. What other fibers do we make from plants? We got a lot of them.
Rayon.
Yeah, that's a big one right now. Yeah. Rayon is an interesting one because it's an extruded fiber. So it's not a totally natural one like a bast fiber. A bast fiber just means a fiber that's from the stalk of a plant, like hemp, linen, ramie, nettle, which is ramie. It's fine. But an extruded fiber like rayon or tencel is like they took a piece of wood and they crushed it up small, and then they put it through a bunch of chemical processes and then squeezed it out to make new long fibers. So it is much more natural than something like a polyester. Like it's not plastic, but it is more resource intensive than say a hemp would be. So it's absolutely a natural fiber, and it behaves a little bit differently than some other natural fibers do. So it's a thing to be aware of. So all of this is to say that we can dye any natural fiber and a couple synthetic ones. We cannot dye most synthetic fibers. So most synthetic fibers are made of plastic, and most of that plastic is a product of the, like a waste product of the oil industry. So polyester and elastic and nylon and things like that are all plastic. And by the way, are responsible for more than half of the ocean microplastics. So strong recommend not to throw away all of your plastic garments, but to like slowly phase them out of your wardrobe. Don't buy new plastic things. We can all do better than that because the plastic's in our blood now.
Do we burn them or what?
Don't burn them. Yeah, it's tough. There's no great way to get rid of plastic fabrics at this point, but they are like real destructive to the environment. So that's another great reason to work in local textiles. Is working with natural things means that we can make much more responsible choices for the planet and for our own health around that. Yes. And then I want to talk a little bit about the ways that they behave. So cellulose fibers tend to not absorb quite as brightly as protein fibers do. So these are not dyed with the same thing, but just kind of as an example, that you might get a yellow like this on a cotton and a yellow like this on a wool. So those are kind of the differences to expect. However, plant fibers are a lot more forgiving and a lot more like hard wearing than animal fibers can be. Oh, a quick side note about protein fibers. There are non-animal protein fibers. Oh, also milk and blood are dyeable proteins. Milk and blood are dyeable proteins. Have you ever seen a barn? I'm surprisingly getting no nods. No one's ever seen a barn. Okay. A barn is a place where they put horses sometimes. You've seen a barn. Oh, yeah, you've seen this. It's like barn with a B. Yeah, somewhere. So the reason that barns are red, traditionally, is that a long time ago, they used to be painted with the type of dye that was most convenient to dairy farmers, which was leftover blood and milk. But you can also use soy milk if you would like a protein fiber that does not have animals in it. You can also treat your cellulose fiber with a protein bath, like a cow milk or a soy milk, to change its composition to have the proteins bind to the outside so that it will start behaving like a protein fiber, meaning it will take color better and last longer. That's a good idea.
How long do you soak fabric in the milk to get it to set in?
You want to soak it for about 12 hours the first time and then dry it, and then dip it in for a couple seconds and then dry it, and then dip it in for another couple seconds and then dry it. You're building up thin layers. It's not about the length of the soak It's not about the length of the soak in general. It's about building up small, like translucent layers that will be able to adhere to one another. Yeah, and the more times you dip it, the more proteiny it will be. The soy milk one is like a kind of a classic Japanese tradition that works really, really well. Yeah. One thing about silk is that it does not absorb quite as well as wool. Wool is really the gold standard because wool, if you look at a wool fiber, it's got all these little scales in it. And those scales, they open up in the hot water of the dye bath and will absorb all the liquids really well. I brought here today some silkworms. So I'm going to pass them around so you can see them. You can touch them gently. You can hold them. You can pick them up in your hand. Just, please try not to squish them. And silkworms are edible, for sure. In a couple of days, maybe tomorrow, if we're lucky. Can I give you this? Thank you very much. They will start to make their silk cocoons. They're already making little bits of sericin from their little sticky mouths already, which is pretty cool. It's great. It looks good. Thank you very much. So we are now coming to the actual first part of the dyeing process. So once you've selected, thank you very much, selected your fiber, which in this case is a sheep wool fiber, and some pre-purchased silken scarves, we are going to do what's called mordanting. Who read the handout and remembers what mordanting is? Who's going to read it right now and tell us?
Are there any extra handouts?
We should put both of those on the heat and put it in the hot water.
It's a chemical salt.
It is a chemical salt. Wow, what a good memory. Yeah, so a mordant is a chemical salt that helps dyes bind to fabric. It's actually an old French word, mordant, which is biting, to bite. So that's kind of fun, using dead languages in real life. And it was because medieval European dyers believed that what it did was it had tiny little teeth and it would bite into your fabric and help it stick. That's not actually how it works. It makes these cool complexes that like adhere to the outside. It doesn't matter. There's some science things. It's irrelevant. But the point is they help them stick a lot better. Not all dye traditions use mordants. That's like Western European dye tradition, which is like most of the heritage that I practice from. But many places use other methods to help stick things to fabric. So if something needs a mordant, it's called an adjective dye If something does not meet a mordant, it's called a substantive dye. Some things that we're going to use today are substantive. Lungwort is substantive, meaning it does not need a mordant. But something like the Avernia, the oak moss, needs a mordant or it will not stick. So it's important to keep in mind. So what we're going to do in order to mordant these things is we're going to put them in a pot, that pot, and we're going to put them in with the chemical salt called aluminum potassium sulfate. You can make your own aluminum potassium acetate at home. Sorry, aluminum acetate. There's no potassium in that. Aluminum acetate. Sorry. At home by taking a piece of aluminum or an aluminum pot and putting a mixture, 50-50 mixture of white water. Thank you. White vinegar and regular water, clear water. Why is there water white? Regular water. Don't drink the white water. Suspicious. And you can put it in and let it soak for 6 weeks, and it will actually cause little bits of that metal to slough off and become part of the liquid inside of it. So you can use that as a mordant if you prefer not to use one from the store. You can also buy them pretty cheaply from the store, but the stronger ones that you buy from the store have to be disposed of a little more carefully. Aluminum potassium sulfate is a common additive in pickles. You've all eaten it before, probably. It's not a big hazard, but if you're having really big concentrated amounts of it, like if we poured a bunch of alum in here for like a few months, we could kill some of the plants that are around it. So it's really important to do it outside in a ventilated area, and when you are done, to dispose of it in a good and responsible way. And the way, I'm going to wait for questions in just a second, but the way that we're going to mordant things is all you got to do is you put the mordant in the pot, put the fiber in the pot, and you can let it sit cool overnight, or if you're doing a rush job, it's fine. If you're doing a rush job, as we are today, then you can plop it in and then talk for an hour, and then they will be ready. Can I get some people to do some plopping? Yes, whoever said that. I'll just hold them until someone comes. Do you want to take some? Yes, and this one, it needs to be freed from its plastic prison. You're going to take it out. You're going to put it in the pot. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go get it. Yeah, put them in the pot. So a general rule, thinking how much alum do I need? It's about 10% to the weight of fiber. So if you had 100 pounds of fiber, that's a lot. Good for you. You need a very big pot. Then you're going to want 10 pounds of alum to go with it. Alum is one type of mordant. Other mordants can include, do other dyers want to say other types of mordants?
Ferrosulfate.
Ooh, iron, yes, ferrosulfate.
Is milk a mordant? No, it is.
Milk is not a mordant, it's an additive, but like we were talking about, it does make a big difference.
Soda ash?
Soda ash is it's going to change the pH of it, so it definitely makes a difference to the dye. Also, thank you for bringing up, mordants help them stick to the dye, help the dye stick to the cloth better, and also they can change the color of the dye. So for example, these two right here, these are the same fabric and the same mushroom dye. Oh, look at this, synergy. This mushroom dyed both of these, but you see they're quite different. And the reason they are different is that they use different mordants. This one uses alum, and this one uses iron. And as a general rule, alum tends to make things the color that they are, their true color, but brighter and better. And iron tends to make things sad. That's the actual dyeing term. There's a bunch of emo words in dyeing. To sadden, to bleed, to die. So there's that to look forward to.
Iron water?
Just iron water. So the same way I just said that you can make your own alum at home, you can make your own iron that way. You get a jar. You fill it with rusty nails. You put a 50-50, sorry, I slept like 3 hours. 50-50 mixture of white vinegar and water. Shake it up, let it sit for 6 weeks. Boom. Mordant. It'll last you a year or two.
Do you want to put it in like plastic, or is there a steel?
Put it in glass. Glass is best. If you put it in plastic, it can eat away the plastic, and then suddenly you have a big old mess of mordant all over the floor, and it will dye your rug. Ask me how I know. And if you put it in other metals, because different metals can make different mordants, you may affect the quality of your mordant. I don't think they heard that, but it's still true. Questions about the mordanting process?
You're putting it in the mordant right now.
This is the mordant right there. Will you hold up this alum,
And
please?
the dye is the next process?
Yes. So first we pick our fiber, then we make our mordant, then we do our bath. So this is some alum I bought at a store. And then this is a pot with water in it. And how much alum did we put?
10%.
Yeah. It's fine.
The iron? Where do you get the iron?
You can either buy iron. You could have some of mine if you want. I've got like a 5-year supply. I don't need it. You can also make your own in the process we just talked about. There are other mordants that you will hear about if you get more into this. Chrome, tin, lead. I strongly advise you not to mess with those. They have much riskier health implications for you, the dyer, and also for the environment, and require more thoughtful disposal methods. So these are really great ones to use at home. And chrome and lead are ones would at least advise very extreme caution with. I don't use those. Yes.
What sort of pots do you recommend we do? Aniline or which should we care?
That's a great question. So there's one other thing called pot mordanting, which is when you use a reactive pot to dye in. Some people don't like to use mordants at all, like we just talked about, either because they use a different dye tradition or because they want to have something that is going to be maximally clean for the environment. So you can use different types of pots. You see here, this is a stainless steel pot, and this is what I put my iron in. I don't put other mordants in it, just iron. It's really hard to get iron out, and it takes a lot of scrubbing. This here is an aluminum pot. So this is going to add more alum as we dye in it and give a little extra brighter effect. And that's the thing I love about aluminum pots, plus they're very cheap. This, I drove to Seattle for this pot. It was $20 on Craigslist. It's worth like $250.
Good time.
Love this pot. This is a copper pot. And because copper is a great mordant that makes things greener. Copper is a beautiful mordant. You can extract copper in the same way we talked about and get this like beautiful turquoise dye you can use just by itself. It's really fabulous. But it can be kind of toxic to work with in powder form. So I don't really buy copper mordants. I just use this pot. That works pretty well. It was pretty nice.
And you do the same thing with just the vinegar and the water?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it is the mordant. So for this one, we're not adding vinegar to it. So it's not going to mordant as much into this dye bath, so it will not have a strong effect on the dye bath that we're doing today, because that one's actually going to be purple, and we'd rather not green it too much. Yeah, but if we wanted to make it green, we could add some vinegar to it and make it weird.
What about like I save all the rusty metal that I find in the yard and garden streets and stuff, and like put it in the jar with vinegar.
Yeah.
And just like that, do I need to be worried about any of the metals I'm using it? Never really thought about it until you said something about metals.
Well, I mean, if you
They're
found
already old and rusty. And
mostly old rusty things are going to be fine. If you found something that was like high in lead, like there's not a safe amount. Thank you. Will you put that in the pot, please? There's not a safe amount of lead. Yeah. So sometimes some old things can be high in lead, and that's just like a risk of, and that's just like a risk of living in the world these days, and a thing to keep an eye out for.
So you want to start with rusty stuff, not just like put a new nail in.
You can use a new nail, but what you're trying to do is to make it rusty. So A, rusty stuff is available and probably not very valuable to you, so it's a really great way to use that resource. And B, it's like already started the process. It's already done some of the work for you, which as a lazy person, I love. Yeah. Was there another thing over there? Good question. Alum is a shorthand, because we don't have to say aluminum potassium sulfate every time because it's tedious. So alum means an aluminum mordant. It could be aluminum potassium sulfate or aluminum acetate. Some people like to only use aluminum acetate for cellulose, but it's expensive and annoying, and I don't think it makes a big difference. So I just use potassium sulfate for everything, but both are alum. Yeah. Other questions about mordants before we talk about the actual dyeing with lichens? Okay. Hey Orca, there's a little box with my like pre-made purple and pink dyes in it. It's either in this car or it's back at my tent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Cool. We're going to talk about dyes and then we're going to do some dyeing together. So everyone who's here, we're going to take a little couple pieces of string together and we're going to take them from our mordant bath and then you can dye them in whichever ways you like. We are going to have 3 dye baths today. We've got the pumpkin pie lichen, the Ochrolecia. We've got the oak moss, the smelly perfume guy, Avernia prunasteri. And then we've got our beloved lungwort right here, who makes that color, this nice tan. So, of people who read the handout, what are the methods for making dyes with lichens? I think there's 3.
Ammonia.
Ooh.
What do I say?
Wow. you guys know so much. So does somebody want to read or paraphrase the boiling water method? What is the boiling water method? Oh, you could probably figure that out.
The boiling water method works well for lichens that are high in tannins or other water-soluble dye components. Simply simmer the lichen in water for 1 to 3 hours, then add in your fibers and simmer a little longer. Let cool overnight, then drain.
Wow. So well phrased. Thank you.
These guys right here.
Nope.
Different?
Nope. It's a big box full of the liquid, the nasty, the liquid pumpkin pie. Yep. Thank you. What about the other ones? What about ammonia? The ammonia method.
You have to ferment the lichens in ammonia for several days or months. What?
That's right. Yeah. So some lichens that are high in tannins will often make brown, black, reddish colors. But if you want to make bright pinks, blues, and purples, you want orchil-bearing lichens. And you might think to yourself, what do I want? Bright blues, pinks, and purples. If you are a dye person, you know these bitches are so hard to make. Fun fact about dye history. So natural dyes were only invented in 1860 by some dude who was trying to make something else. Doesn't matter. But so it's really recent. Natural dyes have been important for human history for a very long time. They have caused the rise and fall of empires. They've caused wars and depression. They've caused huge economic booms. Like, it is a thing that seems like a small hobby to us in this day and age, but it has been like the wheel on which the earth has turned for a long time. So if you've heard of Tyr or Tyrian purple, that is, I see a nod. I see you nodding. That is a whole empire that was really built on the tears of snails.
What?
Yeah, sad. Purple was such an incredible and rare color in those days. This is a Phoenician empire, by the way. That if you could make purple, you would be one of the richest people in town. And there were sumptuary laws that said that only royalty or people who were adjacent to royalty, like the baron equivalents, could wear things like red and purple because they were such sacred colors. And if you were caught wearing them as a commoner, you could be killed. Like, this was a big deal. A lot of this could be killed right now for our purple and red having. Yeah, get it, rebel. So what they would do in that day and age, they found that there was this species of murex snail, a Mediterranean sea snail, who, when you poke them, they get sad and they cry a little bit. And it's not from sadness. It doesn't matter. It's ooze. It's not truly tears. It's ooze. They ooze tears. And their tears are this like beautiful chartreusey color, and then they oxidize to be purple. And people were like, hot damn, look at this purple. I'm going to be a king now. And it worked out really well for them until it suddenly didn't, because they killed almost all the snails and their whole empire collapsed within like a decade and a half. Also, have you heard of Brazil? No one? Oh. The country Brazil is actually named for a dye stuff, Brazil wood. So it's a beautiful pinky red dye that comes from a tree in Brazil and is a big part of the reason for the like South American transatlantic slave trade, is that people were coming to work on Brazil wood plantations. Also, indigo in the United States pre the cotton boom was the biggest reason for the transatlantic slave trade in the United States. Was that blue was such an important color economically that people were making these huge plantations and enslaving people to work on them. So it's a quick side note that like we see dyes now as like these like silly frivolous things, but like there's a lot of really deep history there. And some of it is really cool and really beautiful, and some of it is really dark and really awful. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry. Anything on a slavery note is always weird. Yeah. Anyway, what about ammonia dyes? So, right. Lichens that contain orchil are the ones that make the beautiful blues, purples, and reds. And you can test to see if a lichen has orchil in it by taking a little drop of bleach and putting it on the thallus of the lichen itself. And if it turns red or reddish, that means that it has the potential to turn into a reddish or pinkish dye. So this one is a great example. If you use the boiling water method on it, it will make a pale beige. It will bring out just the tannins. And if you want to bring out the orchils to make these nice pinks, you have to ferment it in ammonia for about 6 months. How do you think people used to do that?
They pissed on it.
They pissed on it. Yeah, they did. Smelly. You can still do that now. I live in an apartment, and so I'm not going to have a container of my own pee in the closet for 6 months. So I buy ammonia from the store, which is also fine. But if you want to be real traditional, you can just have a big old bucket of piss. And piss like functions as part of the dye process in a really fundamental way. If you know anyone with the last name Fuller, I want you to tell them this fact. They have one of those like use last names, a last name that comes from a job. And the job of a fuller is to make it full, is to make the wool full. And the way they would do that is they would take hot, steaming vats of fermented urine and pour it into a big, big vat. And they would often get really drunk before this. And then they would come out and they would step on the wool. And the hot ammonia-filled pee combined with the stompy feet would cause the wool to felt together and make it a stronger, more water-impervious fabric. Yeah, isn't that gross? Tell your fuller friends. That's for them. Let's all stand up really quickly and do a little quick stop, just for funsies. Funsies! Full it! Full it! We're fulling out the fabric. It's hot in the pee, and we're drinking all the beers. It's hot, and we're drunk. Don't fall in the pee.
Don't fall in
Very, very fall. Nice dry fabric, and it's made of wool. Thank you. Thanks for that. Oh, look at your technique. Oh, fancy footwork. Looks nice, man. So, you know, a lot of societies that like make in rainy areas that have garments that are just like one solid piece of fabric, like a kilt is a great example of that, where it's like one fabric and you like bunch it up and you zoom it over your shoulder like that. Those are often using fulled wools because that fabric is now pretty waterproof and warm and thermoregulatory, which is neat. Ammonia method. Questions about the ammonia of that one?
Is it like an open vat fermentation on the urine, or?
No, you don't have to, and I don't want to. So you only have to smell it when you take it out, and then it does smell bad. And shortly, this will smell bad, and it looks like that's it there. That's good. So we're about ready to start taking our dyes out and dyeing our strings. But first, let's talk about photooxidative dyes. I'm pretty sure that there's something on your handout about that.
Oh, is that the cyanotype that people do?
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool that you know that.
It's all the rage right now too. I'm seeing like so many farmers markets and artists.
Yeah, so cyanotypes are an amazing example of a photooxidative dye. It's a dye who is changed by the radiation, the photoradiation, the light-based radiation of the sun. So cyanotypes you see in farmers markets are done using synthetic chemicals, but you can make your own cyanotypes using certain types of lichens who make photooxidative dyes. And oftentimes they photooxidate to be blue. It's so cool. So cool.
So oh, go ahead.
Well, there's missing words in here, and I'm curious what they are.
In common.
Common in. Or was that an erase? Like, never mind, don't read that. Common in.
Ha! You know? I don't know.
All right.
Sorry, I made this like 9 months ago, this handout, and then the file got corrupted, and so I literally just had to like trace over it all this morning.
Wow.
And I don't remember what all the words are. So I did a lot of guessing, and I missed that part.
It looks like it says bacon, but I don't think it does.
It's common in bacon. It's true now. We've said it, and there's no going back. No, I don't know what that said. It may have said that it's common in rock-dwelling lichens because that's true. I'm guessing that's what it said. Who knows? But it is true that many lichens that grow on rocks are the ones that are photooxidative like that. So if you were using, if you look at your page that has the different species on it, does anyone see one there that's a photooxidative dye? They'll all be using the abbreviations AM, BW, and common toadskin. Yeah, what else?
Dark crottle.
And the elegant sunburst is the one I would really recommend around here. When you dye it with the ammonia method, it makes a pink like this, and then when you do photooxidative on top of that, it makes blue. So if you dyed, say, a flat sheet of wool with it, this beautiful pink color, and then set a bunch of flowers on it, and then set it out in the sunshine, anywhere that it experienced intense sunshine recently after dyeing would turn bright blue, and anywhere that didn't would be pink. So when you took off those flowers, you would have blue background with little pink flowers all over it. Strong recommend. Yes.
Do you Mordant in the situation of like a sun oxidized?
I would.
Photooxidized?
Yeah.
You would? Okay.
So for ammonia method, I often will still use a alum Mordant with that. Thank you so much for your service. Quick hug for you. Okay. So these are 2 ammonia lichens brought from home. And this is the one lichen we didn't have an example of. I would love for people to pass this around because this is a really cool one and it's fucking everywhere. You've definitely seen it and you'll see it again. This is a piece of bark. And if you look very closely on it, it's the tiny little pumpkin pie lichen. Really, really closely, they're itty bitty pumpkin pies. And you don't take the bark, you just take the buttons, the tiny, minuscule buttons of these lichens. And then you pop them off and make an ammonia method with them. They're very small. you need about a tablespoon to dye a sweater. So it takes a lot of labor to make a tablespoon, but that one is this purple. And look how frickin' purple. I recommend getting an army of children and setting the children to find the lichens. Eases your labor and they learn about lichens. This one here, this is, which one of these do we think it is? Do we think it's the lungwort, which is boiling water method, or do we think it's the Avernia, which is ammonia method?
Avernia.
Exactly, because it's pink, it's an orcheel-bearing lichen. So this is the Avernia, and I'm going to open it now. It's smelly. Do you want to pass it around, or do you just want to experience the smell from here?
Maybe from far away.
Yeah.
Cool. Imagine it. It's like...
How long has that one been fermenting?
It's not even that bad. I'm going to put more ammonia in it. That one started fermenting like a year ago, and then it got low because I used it for other classes, and I added more to it. Oh, there we go. I added more to it, but yeah. So these are pre-made dye baths. So all we really need to do is heat them up with our mordanted fibers, and they should stick pretty good. This lungwort here is one we started boiling maybe an hour before class, and is just this brown over here. You see how the lungworts have transformed in that time. If you have the time, it's really better to like boil it for a few hours and let it sit overnight and then boil it again in the morning. Do that at home. We didn't do that here. It's fine. Questions about these dye baths? Mm-hmm.
You mentioned being able to dye the patterns of flowers by setting it in the sun.
Yeah, or anything.
Is there a way that you stop the reaction afterwards?
Yeah. So that UV reactivity only happens in the first like 12 to 24 hours after it's dyed, and then it will really stop being photoreactive. Actually, I have a friend named Sydney who made a camera using photooxidative lichen dyes. So it's an actual camera that takes pictures made of lichens. Yeah, he's so cool. I know, exactly. So instead of using like other types of development fluid, the fluid that they're using is a lichen dye. So wherever the light is touching, yeah, it's really cool. So it's a pink and blue photo that comes out. It's very interesting. But I'm so sorry. Can you repeat your question? I got lost. Oh, okay. The reaction will stop. Also, washing it will help kind of stop that. So when you're ready for that to be done, take it inside and wash it. But if you leave photooxidative pod lichen dyes in the sun too long, they will eventually get kind of muddy and fade. So keeping them in the shade is a great way to take care of them. The last thing I want to mention is you see there's some like subtle patterning on these. They're tie-dyed. And so it's good to think about whenever you have a fiber, wherever you put a resist on it, so you tie it, or you tie things around it, or you do not put it in the dye bath, it's not going to make a color there. So even in taking your strings today, you can make patterns on that. You can make little stripes if you'd like, just by tying little knots in the strings. Questions, comments, or we're just about ready to dye? All right, let's dye. Yay.
You know, when she was talking about the lichen camera, I thought they were making this.
I did not
like lichen
I did not understand. Yes. I was like, I don't think it's good. My mind was like, oh, actually imagine if we were made. Yeah, I was thinking.
Making a little this-ish long stems. At least two for everyone, and then some extra. So I want to show you guys really quickly what these dye vats look like. So these are just silk dye hankies, and this is the Avernia. So if we put it in, does it?
Well, it's also going to be way too hot.
Do we have any other sticks or something? It's a concentrated dye bath, y'all. She's very pink.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is one who's very pink. This one is also somewhat sensitive to pH changes. So if you add a lot of acid or a lot of alkali to it, it will alter the effect of the dye bath. We really want to keep this pretty alkali to keep this nice color to it. If it gets too hot or too acidic, it can become brown, which is also nice, but honestly, an easier color to achieve, and we don't want to spend 6 months fermenting when we could make brown so much faster.
I have a question.
Yes.
Back onto animal proteins, and sorry for offending anybody, but was menstrual blood ever used for dye?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah, menstrual blood works well as a dye. Yeah, you totally can dye or as a paint. So in the same way we talked about other blood, menstrual blood is not distinct from other blood. Blood is blood. So you can use it in the same way that you would use venous blood or arterial blood, but actually please don't. Why are you bursting arteries? Anyway, yeah, you can totally use menstrual blood. I strongly recommend using a protein binder if you're going to use it on a cellulose something like a paper or a house. But yeah, if you have specific questions, right? It will turn a reddish brown. Period blood is often more oxidized by the time that you get it, so it's often more brown than venous blood. That's a good point about the difference between menstrual blood and other types of blood. That's really the only like noticeable one, and sometimes it's chunky. Sorry. Oh, no. Anyway. So this one is a little more watered down, but you can still see this is the color that we're going to get out of this purple. So you want to leave this one in a little bit longer. I'm going to need one more volunteer who will turn off these heats, please, because I'm actually afraid of trying to find. Thank you for your service. So yeah. Yes, they are. Thank you. And then, oh, thank you. And then would you also take the lid off of that one? So look, you can see, this is a couple of seconds in each dye bath. Wow. To have a more effective color that lasts longer, you want to leave them in for longer. But that's just an example. And you can also layer. All of these colors can be layered together. So you got this purpley guy, he can go in here, and he can get some pink on him. And that's okay.
That'll brighten it up.
Yeah, and it'll
Make it like a tie-dye thing.
Yes, so you can see. Sorry, I have hot hands too. This is actually very hot, and you may not want to do that. But I have burned the nerve endings on my hands. But so you can see here, that's kind of the effect that it makes. In order to have your color actually last, you want to leave it in the dye pot longer than I just did. But this is just a nice example. And then I failed to leave one to color in the brown, so we're going to overdo this guy. That's actually turned really pretty. So that's nice. Nice when that happens. This will not show up as well here because the brown takes a little bit longer because it's not an orchial dye, so it hasn't been ammonia fermented. But you can see how that brown kind of changes the tone already from like 3 seconds. Yeah. Questions, comments before we start dyeing?
Cutting this into pieces.
Did you say something? Oh, well, you get to dye. Oh, I died, and now you die.
That makes sense. Got it.
Not like that.